Hello and welcome to the Season 4 finale of ACRO's Good Clinical Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia McLeod. Today on GCP, I'm joined by Jackie Kent, former ACRO Board Chair, Tinaya Gray, Executive Director, Site Engagement and PACE at ICON, and Jan Hewett, SVP, FDA Regulatory Advisor at Advarra. In this conversation, Tinaya, Jackie, and Jan unpack the work of an ACRO dive team focused on representative generalizable clinical trial data that was convened at the 2025 Innovation Network Gathering. They explore why clinical trial populations still fail to reflect real-world patients, what's been holding the industry back from meaningful progress, and how we can move to practical, implementable solutions. This is a great way to end our 4th season, so without further ado, let's get into the episode. All right, so I am joined today by Jackie, Tinaya, and Jan, and we're talking all things ING dive team and generalizable data. I think this will be a really great conversation, so thanks to the three of you for joining me. I think a great place to start for our listeners is with the why. Why did we do this? Jackie, you and I did a good amount of work on determining what the scope of this dive team would be ahead of the gathering back in October, but I want to let everyone in on our thinking around this. Why did we want to set up the team? Why did we focus on good generalizable data in the first place? And then maybe we'll kick to Tinaya and Jan and pull you guys into, and would love to hear, why you guys think a conversation like this is so important to have as well. So Jackie, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. Well, I think one of the first reasons that we thought this was important to do is the gathering actually has a different audience than a lot of the other events that we participate in. So we had an opportunity to get some new people, new ideas, right? So we had new people we could bring to the table. We also worked together in other forums where we wanted to continue the conversations, right? We wanted to be able to come together and really create a path forward that was very implementable. And we have those opportunities by using this forum, this group of people, and really focusing on this area of our broader issues that we face every day in clinical trials.
Yeah. Oh, definitely something to talk about. Tinaya.
Yeah, having been there, I think your vision was certainly felt within the room where, we're all clear that at a high level, disease does not affect all populations equally. We understand that where someone lives, their environment, their genetics, all of this influences not only whether or not a disease shows up, but how early it's identified, how effectively it's managed, right? At the same time, we know that outcomes vary significantly across populations, and that the data that we all rely on to inform clinical decision-making doesn't always reflect the reality. And I think a really easy, simple example of that is the fact that 4% of the global population is American, or the US population is 4% of the globe. Yet Americans account for 35% of participants in clinical trials, right? And so that disconnect matters for sponsors. In addition, not only does this create an opportunity for us to write that clinical question, but it also represents, I think, a market consideration. And so this dive team was together really thinking about how can we be pragmatic and forward-looking. How do we widen access to research? How do we reduce these inequities in participation? And how do we actually get to the point where we're generating more generalizable data and getting that data in the hands of clinicians and patients for better decision-making? Yeah. Jan, does that reflect what happened in room?
Yeah, yes, actually, so I was a late entry into the dive team. I wasn't part of the original planning for the goals around, what the dive team wanted to accomplish around good generalizable data. But I was very happy to be a part of the dive team, though. It's extremely important to me, given my past and current roles professionally, that we have the right representation for a given clinical trial and that you have the right data to inform us of the medical products that are investigated and marketed. So as you, Tinaya, and Jackie laid out very nicely, the representation matters in terms of the data that's collected and the generalizability of it for ethical and humanistic reasons, because it really does ensure, and having come from the FDA, I'm obviously someone who really hopes that products marketed that serve the people fairly, safely, and with respect. Overall, I found the dive team just incredible. Just the group of people came from all different places and industry and all different locations, and I was just really amazed at how well everybody came together for the topic at hand.
Yeah, and Jan, if I could ask you, and again, would love to hear from Tanea and Jackie, but Jan, maybe we'll start with you. A little bit broader, kind of pulling back from the dive team for a second, and then we'll jump back in. But we've talked about this issue of representative clinical trials a lot over a lot of years. Why do you think we're still talking about it? And what do you feel has maybe hindered actionable progress to this point?
Mm, yeah, well, I certainly think we are still talking about it because it still remains a problem. I think removing current barriers, for example, designing trials that favor speed and homogeneous populations, means that we need to tackle the systemic, operational, regulatory, and community-centered issues, all of which impact including the right participants in a trial and having the right data that comes out of it. For example, I've seen studies that treat diversity as a checklist or treat, inclusivity as a checklist rather than a design priority, using exclusionary eligibility by default or having an over-reliance on narrow criteria for eligibility rather than adding in distinct demographic, biological, genetic, socioeconomic, or other social determinant criteria for a more representative population isn't automatically done. I think in terms of what has hindered actual progress, or what I would call system level blockers, I think first there's a level of fragmented accountability, and that is because the stakeholders, all of them, sponsors, IRBs, investigators, payers, and even regulators, all have different priorities, even though arguably they should have the same priority when it comes to investigating new and unknown medical products on human beings. Very lofty statements there, but I do think we overlap. It's just we just don't tend to think of bringing the right representative population as being an overlapping goal. I also think, but will concede, it is an area that is always under constant scrutiny and assessment, that there is still operational rigidity in many of the tasks related to clinical trials, and that's, budget negotiation, contract negotiation, monitoring, and that by their very nature, they resist or limit adaptive representation and enrollment of appropriate populations for the given clinical trial. I also think there is an over-reliance on site selection based on historical enrollment performance. What's the numeric value of how much that trial has enrolled in the past and the compliance around that performance? But that's very different to the performance with respect to the population sought after and needed for the trial. Lastly, and I have experienced this firsthand a long time ago when I was a research coordinator, the workforce we use to conduct clinical trials are not always trained on culturally competent recruitment strategies and community partnership. For many populations, this is a huge factor when they first engage with whomever, the investigator and the site, to think about wanting to engage with the research, let alone enroll in it. So yeah, I'm optimistic, but I still think we have some of the problems in place.
Yeah. I'd love to piggyback on that. I think Jan described really effectively that this is not a conversation about understanding what works. That was clear, as well as the operational challenges. I'd only love to add that how that translates on in a day-to-day for decision makers is that all of those things are perceived as introducing uncertainty and operational complexity. And in an industry that is highly risk aware, uncertainty can slow action, right? Even when we have a really strong case, even when there may be additional cost in the future. So to that said, I think we're not operating, in a vacuum, and that up until recently, much of the momentum that we did have was guided by principles around emergent expectations rather than requirements. I think where we're hopefully finding ourselves now is that globally, regulators and industry guidance continues to consistently reinforce the expectation that clinical evidence should be relevant to populations. And we're seeing that in unique ways where percentages from certain continents have to be part of the global delivery data set, even in the US. So I think there is now more and more opportunity to continue to move from, what do we do, to how do we actually execute this as a core component of our overall strategy, and how must we do this in order to continue to operate, global and multi-regional clinical trials.
I'd like to build on a few of the points that both Jan and Tinaya brought up. When we talk about the ability to ensure we have the right representation, we are basing that on the reason we do science, the reason we must do good science with good trial design. So while we would all like the guidance to be in every regulatory organization, we would like clarity on expectations, both for delivering a trial as a sponsor, executing a trial as a site. The regulatory agencies aren't all going to do it the same way. They may, like the FDA did, put it in place, remove it, put it in place, remove it, right? We need to go ahead and depend on our sponsors to be delivering the right information about the clinical trial, about the medicine they're studying, and the true prevalence and science behind that, so we can design the trials and execute them with the right populations. If we all start with the right science in mind, we will do the best job for patients everywhere, whether it's ethnicity, it's genetics, it is country, right? We will focus on, by focusing on the science, we will deliver the best outcomes with the highest efficacy possible for patients. And if we all start with that basic in mind, then we can do a good job of working on how we execute them better. How can we make them more available? How can we build trust so we have better access? How can we make sure we have enough PIs to actually execute these trials? All the other things that many people across our industry are very good at doing, we can implement those when we know we have a great trial design with solid science and we find the right populations of people.
Well said. That was perfect. I want to now jump back into the dive team room. So, Tinaya, maybe I'll start with you on this one. Take me back to October. How did the conversation evolve? How did the group coalesce around this project? What exactly are we talking about when I keep saying this project? What was the product, so to speak, that the dive team came up with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jan mentioned that there were a lot of different perspectives in the room, which I think really contributed to our ability to get to this product that I'll describe. But, there were also people who have been working in this and around spaces like this for some years. And so there was a shared sense of fatigue, but in a productive way. The team really quickly understood the importance, was familiar with the data and all the places that we already understood. The question wasn't awareness, it wasn't values, it wasn't what are the constraints. The group really aligned around, how can we achieve the outcomes that we say we want? We're not going to focus on any one, stakeholder. At the end of the day, how can we empower patients? How can we have better informed physicians? How can we get data that is truly fit for real world decision making? And when we looked around at all of the remaining, if you will, practical levers, we looked at, what are the levers that can be pulled for meaningful change? And the goal was sort of simple, but also ambitious. And it was, we have to move and touch the levers in the ecosystem that have significant influence and oversight, yet are not widely being accessed and informed as stakeholders in this process. And we landed on ensuring that we can, A, engage our ethics and oversight committees to simply include as part of their oversight an understanding of how we and sponsors plan to deliver representative trials. What does that operational action plan look like? And then also building in, a system or an expectation by which that data can be more routinely and uniformly and systematically available for physicians and clinicians to be informed about who was included in this trial. What does this data mean to better enable those real world discussions that they need to have with patients around their treatment? So I'll pause there and say, Jan, you were in room and a major part of those discussions. Does that accurately reflect your memory?
100%. I mean, Tinaya, when you stated the discussion really landed on this notion of identifying practical levers, the first thing I jumped to was, what is the place that is usually considered a backstop? I know there are other terms that are often given to the same group in terms of roadblocks, but the first thing that came to mind was IRBs are often a backstop to how trial design lands at the end of the day. They do give thoughtful consideration to the populations that are going to be enrolled in the trial and the representation of those populations in order to, obviously, we know all what an IRB from an ethical standpoint is there to do, but it is a balance between striking safe and effective medical products, both for the safety of the participant, but also the data and the integrity of that data that comes out of it. Now, having said that, a lot of times I think IRBs have a prescriptive method of doing that, which is to ask the question, what is your representation going to be for that given trial? I think IRBs can do more. They can provide guidance as to why the investigator or sponsor can think about other populations to include and the rationale for it. So it's not as though I feel as an IRB is the only or one location that it's a lever that can be an automatic one to pull and will ultimately meet the goals. We've got a lot to do in that space, but it is certainly one area that immediately came to my mind based on the discussion in the work group. Yeah.
One of the reasons I think that that idea landed so well is that at the beginning of the session, when we were trying to, get to know each other a little bit, there were some people that were a little deflated by, oh, here we go again, right? And so I really think the fact that we could get through some brainstorming and starting to discuss the role the IRB could play differently or stronger than they do today really motivated people to really think about how we could implement it, how we could communicate with IRBs. I think it was something that hadn't been really tried before, hasn't really been, maybe in the IRBs themselves, they've had discussions, but as a broader group of people, I think they felt, a little revitalized by the idea and very excited to try something different with a group of people that is very well respected.
Yeah. I was jealous I wasn't there. So I'm glad
I
it worked
was, and I was wishing you were there too,
I know.
especially when I lost my voice.
I know.
Yes.
It was not the best timing, but you powered through. And I think we're moving in a really good direction with what this group was able to accomplish. Tinaya, you're a member of ACRO's D&I committee, which has since sort of been tasked, shall we say, with taking up this mantle and really turning this great idea that the dive team came up with into something that we can share with industry and speak about to the masses, shall we say. Can you talk to us a bit about how the ACRO committee is thinking about this and where we're going? And then maybe Jan and Jackie, I'd invite you guys in here too. Obviously, you aren't on this committee, but your thoughts about where we go next and kind of build on this momentum.
Yeah. I think our team is excited about it. The committee is looking at joining this effort is not about signing on to a philosophy or some sort of ethical question. We see in many ways our role as contributing real world perspectives to practical solutions and together letting those perspectives ensure the levers that we've identified are not only aspirational but usable and have the collective power of all of our experience behind them. So I think this work importantly serves so many of our collective interests that we're really aligned on how do we empower these stakeholders to take advantage of all that we've, come to experience in the last few years, as well as the continued collaborative experience that we continue to share across the industry.
I just wanted to add, as a previous ACRO chair, I know the quality of work that that team produces, and so it's very exciting that the dive team led into the ACRO DEI team taking this on. From prior experience, I would say they will continue to deliver something that's very useful to the industry. And we can all look forward to seeing those outcomes.
Well, I'm excited to see what comes out of everything, and obviously Jackie and Tinaya have so much experience in this domain in the sense of working with ACRO. I hope that it's the product that comes out will actually be one that can be utilized from both a national and global experience and utility. So whatever I can do to help in that regard, I'm here. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And thank you for saying that. I would be remiss if I did not mention that the group has been really focused on the emerging global focus of not only countries but also our sponsors, really looking at like what does it mean to have a representative trial in spaces where access may all be quite similar, diagnosis may be somewhat difficult, and so we're grappling with those questions now, I think, in many ways, and we're excited about making sure that we can connect those dots to really practical ways to ask and answer questions at a trial level through this engagement that are going to be really unique to where we're operating as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jan, maybe we got to get you on the committee. Maybe
I was just thinking
I'm sure you've got a ton of free time.
I am sure there's a place in that committee for you.
I feel like I just put my hand up.
I'm sure you might have. No. Amazing. Well, the ACRO committee has its marching orders moving forward with this project. Would love to know from you guys, just to close us out, what you would say to broader industry to kind of pull them back into this effort. Obviously, a lot of them were in the room. As we've mentioned, it was a very diverse stakeholder group. So we had folks from sponsors and, outside of the ACRO membership. But what would you say to the rest of industry, whether it's to sponsors or academia or patient groups, to share in the importance of having them join into this type of an effort as we move forward? Go ahead.
Yeah. Happy to start. Just a really simple statement. Come shape the how. Right? Just engage in the practical, tactical work, pressure test it, right? Don't implement it until you've done a pilot with us, right? Help us move this from a set of ideas into a standard practice with commercial value. From my perspective, it's really that simple.
Yeah, I would say implementation is going to be key here. So the outcomes that are actually delivered, I think it's important that we make them as public as possible so the most people can implement them, and we ensure everyone, like Tinaya says, should get out there and commit to doing a pilot and then moving on to a true implementation. And if anybody has, more insights on how we can help the academic sites, right, and the academic IRBs, we'd probably love to hear about that.
For me, it's going to be not just the implementation, but the education and advocacy of it all, how we can, inform every stakeholder the necessity to do this and come at it basically with a notion that it's not fixable. It is fixable. It's just a matter of who we engage, how we do it, and what can be accomplished. Even if it's incremental steps, it's going to make a big difference at the end of the game.
Amazing. Well, I think we've made the case for this, and I'm really excited to see where we go with it. I think this is a really exciting project that we've taken on internally at ACRO, obviously building on the great work that you guys did at ING last year. So with that, I want to thank the three of you for joining me. This has been a really great conversation. Love to have you back. maybe see where we're at a year from now or so and see how the implementation and the education and the advocacy is going. Thanks so much for tuning in to the season finale of season 4 of ACRO's Good Clinical Podcasts. While we wait for the season 5 premiere, feel free to catch up on what you might have missed on ACRO's website, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.